hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Glad to be with you and hope for everyone in the Carolinas that you are getting and staying safe and as dry as possible. Let's start with Venezuela, which is implementing the Democrat-desired policies. You know the ones we're talking about, the ones that are favored by Bernie Sanders and Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, who is now the latest dim bulb socialist who is out there trying to talk about what this country should do. And there are three things that are of importance. There's universal health care, there is free college, and there's also making sure that there is a high enough minimum wage for people to live on. Let's start with universal health care. So does Venezuela have universal health care? According to telesurtv.net, Venezuela joins most of the world in providing free health care to most of its population. 60% is what I understand. But here's a problem when you start talking about their health care.
Freddy Herrera has spent 9 months in this Caracas public hospital, unable to walk after a motorcycle accident. 13 operations later, his condition has worsened. Freddy contracted several new infections in the operating theatre due to poor hygiene and medicine shortages. He needs another procedure to save his leg, but the ordeal is just too much.
Now I'm afraid of the operating rooms. I don't want to go up to surgery anymore because each time I come back I'm worse, and I don't want that. I'm afraid.
The hospital keeps water in buckets because it only has supply 4 days a week. Medical instruments like respiratory tubes, meant to be used only once, are washed and reused. These dire conditions have claimed several victims, says Efrain Vegas, an orthopedic surgery student.
We have people who have lost limbs and had to undergo amputations because of poor sterilization in operating theaters. We have people who die on night watch. I've seen 3 or 4 people, including children, die over supply shortages.
But this hospital's problems are not unique. More than 3/4 of public hospitals lack medicine or surgical material, according to the Venezuela Health Observatory. Doctors stand by helpless.
I know the patient's condition, I know what to do, but I don't have the means to do it. It's like an architect without pencils, or a reporter without a microphone or camera. How do you do it? It's an utter frustration because I can't help. I can't heal. I can only ease the suffering.
As the medical system collapses, many are giving up. Vegas plans to look for opportunities abroad when he finishes training, joining the exodus of thousands of other doctors as his country struggles to heal.
So explain to me the benefit of a quote-unquote free healthcare system when you don't have sterile equipment, when you don't have supplies, when the doctors get to watch you suffer because they don't have what it requires to remove your suffering. They cannot treat you. Is that what you want for the United States? Because that's what you have in Venezuela. Let's not forget that Venezuela, not that long ago, was extremely wealthy. And the source of that wealth hasn't gone anywhere. Oil is still there. They still have plenty of oil. It's not a matter of revenue. It's a matter of something else. What about free education? That's another thing that our leftist, socialist individuals are keep saying we need to have. We need to have free education. Well, is that what you have in Venezuela? Venezuela has more than 90 institutions of higher education, 860,000 students as far back as 2002, and higher education remains free under their 1999 Constitution. Well, they have that. But what is education looking like today in Venezuela? Like the previous clip, this clip is also from November of 2016, not that long ago.
A school day begins in the slums of Caracas, but 14-year-old Maria Arias won't have a full day of classes at her high school.
Most of the teachers hardly come. We sometimes will go for 4 hours without a single class.
The fall in oil prices, years of economic mismanagement, and soaring crime have brought Venezuela to a crisis, and the once envied school system is in chaos, leaving classrooms empty. A parent group estimates that Venezuelan children are missing 40% of class time this year.
At the high school, there is always some problem. Sometimes there are fires. There are fights between students. The high school is ugly.
On top of that, teachers have been killed in the violence gripping the country. Armed robbers enter schools, blackouts leave classrooms dark, and students faint from hunger.
I can't even give them money for snacks. I cannot even buy a packet of crackers and give them one to take to school, like I used to.
Lack of food is a chief reason schools are failing. Teachers and students often miss class to spend hours in food lines.
My colleagues have to bring food to their homes. Students are not coming as often to classes, and the dropout rate is high because I think they're in food lines. They need to eat breakfast, but sometimes they don't have any.
Gym class used to take place in this patio. Now kids gamble. The teacher was killed in a gun battle.
Everything is getting worse, and the quality of life has diminished. It's hard, even though we try to stick together and teach the children that the only way forward is studying.
But Maria is losing hope that her education will be a path to a better life. Warren Levinson, Associated Press.
So the schools are falling apart. You don't have teachers. Teachers are getting killed. You have students going to schools that are falling apart, and they just sit there for hours at a time because there's no one to teach them. This is what's going on in Venezuela. Do you want that in America? Now, we're close to that on some levels, and our public education system, as far as teachers are concerned, and particularly female teachers, is abominable. I'm sorry, but it is what it is. Now, that last one, or the last topic, there's always the whole idea of a living wage, and you hear in this country the fight for 15. Well, you know what's interesting in Venezuela, and I do mean interesting, Venezuela has been pumping up the minimum wage for at least the last 3 years. I'm sorry, you just keep seeing this. 15%, 30%. 3 years ago it was 30%, and then they raised it again 8 months ago, and then most recently they came up with a proposal that, oh my gosh, they hiked up the minimum wage, I believe, by 30 times. They had a 3,500% minimum wage increase. That's 35x. while forbidding store owners to raise any prices. In other words, they basically said, you know what, you need to pay these people 35 times more than what you're paying them, and no, you got to do it out of whatever money you're bringing in right now. You have the money. Don't lie to us and say you don't. You're just hoarding the money in a country that is going broke and starving. You're hoarding the money and refusing to pay people. That's what they're saying. So how is that working out in Venezuela?
Empty freezers have become a common sight in supermarkets in Caracas. Many have not been in stock for weeks. Cattle producers complained they were not consulted when Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro announced new price regulations that set the price for 1 kilo of beef at $1.
Meat disappeared. There is no meat anywhere.
This shopper had been waiting more than 10 hours outside this store after she looked for meat in 6 different supermarkets.
Either you eat meat or you don't eat anything. So Venezuelans don't eat anything because there is nothing.
Venezuelans say many people are going hungry.
You can't find eggs. You can't find meat. To buy chicken, you have to make a huge line. I'm old. I can't do the lines.
Venezuela's opposition party says it is not just food shortage that have shaken the country's economy. Despite government-mandate salary increases, hyperinflation, when the average price of goods rises more than 50% each month, has severely affected the ability of most Venezuelans to buy the things they need. For this Venezuelan mother, purchases are decided by necessity.
If you buy food, you can't buy diapers. If you buy diapers, you can't buy food. If you buy milk, you can't buy other food.
Venezuela's government has threatened to imprison merchants who don't comply with the price regulations, which is what happened last month when 5 supermarket and pharmacy managers were sent to jail.
Those products that have been fixed at agreed prices must be maintained in a stable manner, and with this agreed price, we guarantee that the cost of production and profits will be covered.
Officials from Venezuela's opposition party say as much as 50% of all businesses operating in Caracas will be forced to shut down because of the Maduro's government draconian economic packages. Many small businesses have already been forced to lay off workers as they struggle to pay the higher wage demanded by the government. Adriana Núñez Rabascal, VOA News, Caracas.
That report was filed on 15 September of this year. Please explain to me how you can dictate what somebody can charge, raise their labor costs by 35 times, and then say that their profits will be maintained. How does that? You can't say that and be lucid. But he did say it. You heard him. Not surprisingly, 40% of store owners, retail outlet, people who run retail outlets in Venezuela are closing their doors. Because it's like either run at a loss or go to jail. Well, I don't want to go to jail because I'm going to have the same problem. So they just don't go to jail. Oh, by the way, inflation in that country is 200% per month. 200% monthly. We're talking about hyperinflation. You really want to understand what the problem is in Venezuela? See, there's a reason why these policies don't work. If you really understand what that problem is, Donald Trump told you back in September of last year.
The problem in Venezuela is not that socialism has been poorly implemented, but that socialism has been faithfully implemented. The socialist dictatorship of Nicolás Maduro has inflicted terrible pain and suffering on the good people of that country. This corrupt regime destroyed a prosperous nation by imposing a failed ideology that has produced poverty and misery everywhere it has been tried. The Venezuelan people are starving, and their country is collapsing. Their democratic institutions are being destroyed. This situation is completely unacceptable, and we cannot stand by and watch. As a responsible neighbor and friend, we and all others have a goal. That goal is to help them regain their freedom, recover their country, and restore their democracy. I would like to thank leaders in this room for condemning the regime and providing vital support to the Venezuelan people. The United States has taken important steps to hold the regime accountable. We are prepared to take further action if the government of Venezuela persists on its path to impose authoritarian rule on the Venezuelan people.
Oh, by the way, the Organization of American States is not ruling out military intervention in Venezuela if things get worse. From the Associated Press, with respect to military intervention to overthrow Nicolas Maduro, I don't think any option should be ruled out. This was from OAS Secretary General Luis Almagro at a press conference in the Colombian city of Cúcuta. What Nicolas Maduro's regime is perpetrating are crimes against humanity, the violation of human rights, and suffering of people that is inducing an exodus. Yes, people are trying to get out of there, and people are not wanting Venezuelans coming into their country. They're having problems everywhere they go because economic refugees are the worst kind. They bring a problem into your country that nobody wants to deal with, and therefore they're being rejected. Diplomatic action should be the first priority, but we shouldn't rule out any action. Venezuela's neighbors will eventually force the issue of intervention as a number of people fleeing the countries continue to swell the refugee camps along the borders. The U.S. is rightly keeping a low profile, although in a crisis should be ready to offer logistical assistance. Understand this if you understand nothing else. Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, they're all of the same ilk. It's just a matter of how outspoken they are about it. They are socialists. At least Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez are upfront about it. There are others. Cynthia Nixon was upfront about it, and she lost, but it doesn't matter. The fact that you could even have that Looney Tune run lets you know that things have gone too far in this country. The Democrat Party is increasingly socialist, period. What is happening in Venezuela, where you take a prosperous country and turn them into a nation of beggars, is the inevitable result of the faithful implementation of socialism. Period. So before you go off and take these people with their faux compassion and their so-called concern for humanity, remember what the Secretary General of the Organization of American States said about Venezuela. They are perpetrating crimes against humanity. Socialism is a crime against humanity. They are violating the human rights of the Venezuelan people. Socialism is a violation of human rights when it is implemented faithfully. If you don't want to see this, the easiest way to avoid it is to vote away every Democrat that comes within sniffing distance of public office. The other way, which is just as actually more effective, is to take up arms. But I don't know that you have the will to do the latter. So I'm hoping you'll simply do the former on November 6th. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', we'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us, also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Let's move on to the resurgence, to the extent he actually ever went away is debatable. Obama has come back, and he is now talking to help out the Democrats in their drive to conjure up this mythical, magical, and delusional blue wave that they're expecting to propel them back to a majority in the House and in the Senate in the midterm elections coming up on November 6th. Obama started off pretty strong, word-wise, in Illinois back on the 7th of September.
As a fellow citizen, not as an ex-president, but as a fellow citizen, I'm here to deliver a simple message and that is that you need to vote because our democracy depends on it. The status quo pushes back. Sometimes the backlash comes from people who are genuinely, if wrongly, fearful of change. More often it's manufactured by the powerful and the privileged who want to keep us divided and keep us angry and keep us cynical because that helps them maintain the status quo and keep their power and keep their privilege. It did not start with Donald Trump. He is a symptom, not the cause. He's just capitalizing on resentments that politicians have been fanning for years. We're supposed to stand up to discrimination. And we're sure as heck supposed to stand up clearly and unequivocally to Nazi sympathizers. How hard can that be, saying that Nazis are bad?
He gave those remarks at a Illinois university, and I have some interesting thoughts about that. The status quo does stand up. It's called the silent majority in America, and they stood up because they are genuinely fearful of the change that you perpetrated upon the nation for 8 years. The weakest economic performance in the history of the United States, a dismantling of the United States military, a demoralizing of that military as well, a weakness of foreign policy where we saw Iranian naval vessels coming aboard, people boarding our ships, Iranian Navy boarding U.S. Navy ships, where we saw you being forced to exit out the back of of Air Force One because the Chinese had so little regard for you. So no, there was no respect for the United States. You were actually helping our adversaries to be able to destroy us not 10 years down the road with your Iran deal. Yes, America looked at those changes and said, yeah, we're genuinely afraid of that, and that's why Hillary Clinton did not win, among other things, aside from the fact that she sucks as a candidate and as a human being. Now, as far as things being hard to say, how hard was it for you to say Islamic terror? I'm not sure I ever heard it come out of your mouth. Nazis have done less to the United States in the last 30 years than Islamic terror has done around the world in the last 5. I don't recall you saying anything against Islamic terror. How hard is it when people are getting blown up, when people are getting machine gunned? How hard is it? Yeah. No estimate of the crowd size could I find at the Illinois speaking event. But he then went on to speak in California to try to drum up support for a number of Democrats there.
Good evening. I'm Rena Ninen. The midterm elections are now less than 2 months away, 59 days if you're keeping count. And the battle for the House of Representatives is heating up today as former President Barack Obama rallied for Democratic congressional candidates in Southern California. Mr. Obama stepped off the campaign sidelines yesterday in Illinois and kept the political punches coming in today in Anaheim. Modalengi has more from the White House.
Former President Barack Obama laid out the stakes as Democrats try to retake the House in the midterm elections.
If we don't step up, things can get worse. In 2 months, we have a chance to restore some sanity in our politics.
He campaigned Saturday for 7 California Democrats, who he hopes will be part of a blue wave this November.
All across the country, you can feel the energy. You can feel people saying, oh, enough is enough.
All that energy he spoke of, he expressed to all of 900 people in Anaheim, California. California is about as blue as they come. I live here, I can tell you. California is blue. So Barack Obama shows up in California. Granted, it was Orange County, but Orange County is still California. I'm sorry. And you could only get 900 people. And if that was a problem, why couldn't you go into Los Angeles? Are you getting the feeling that nobody wants to hear this guy except the mainstream media? I don't know how many people that showed up for him in Illinois. It's his home state, so I'm sure he drew a respectable or a more respectable crowd. He came to California, a state he won twice, a state that actually agrees with every one of his ridiculous policies, and 900 people show up. Wow. He also showed up in Ohio after being in California and had, continued to be pretty much the same drum. It's really not anything positive. It's basically continuing to stoke fear. Aren't you afraid of Trump? Aren't you afraid of what Trump is doing? Aren't you afraid of how he's making you think about each other? I don't know who's afraid of Trump in the United States, except for the mainstream media and liberals, but I don't see the American people being afraid of annualized GDP growth of 4.2%. I don't see that. I don't see the American people being afraid of having more job openings than there are job seekers. I don't see them afraid of historically low unemployment rates. Nevertheless, Barack Obama is campaigning against those things without mentioning them by name.
People of both parties and people who don't have a party affiliation should be concerned with our current course, should be concerned about the basic institutions of our democracy, should want to see a restoration of honesty and decency and lawfulness to our government, and should want to see some sort of checks and balances on what's happening right now. On November 6th, we have a chance to restore some sanity to our politics. We can tip the balance of power back to the American people. Because you are the only check on bad policy. You're the only real check on abuses of power. It's you and your vote.
My. Honesty, decency, and lawfulness from the man who told the political lie of the year in 2013. From the man who still hasn't answered for what happened to folks in Benghazi, who still can't explain to me why he didn't stand up for the Marine who was ridiculously detained for an extraordinarily long time in Mexico, who still can't tell me why Otto Warmbier stayed in North Korea until he came out during the Trump administration, released and died. Can't tell me any of that, but you want to tell me decency and lawfulness? You're the one who actually allowed the IRS to go after people because of their political ideological leanings. You want to return this. You want to tip the balance. Let me help you out with the balance. The balance was tipped by the American people by rejecting everyone in the establishment, both GOP and Democrat, and going with Trump, who made it clear to those who were listening that his interest was in helping the people get back their power, get back their voice, get back what they wanted. And he's been doing just what he said. I'm not saying I love everything he does. I don't care. Excuse me. Let me rephrase that. You're worried about his tweeting. I don't care about his tweeting. I love everything Donald Trump is accomplishing. There is one problem that I have with Donald Trump, and that was with his statement regarding going after people's guns without due process of law. You take that off the books, Donald Trump is a perfect president, because all I measure with presidents is results. Now, I can measure words with Barack Obama, who never accomplished a doggone thing that was helpful to the American people. But it sounded good. Or I can go with Donald Trump, who sounds rough around the edges and everything else and get things done. I want the guy who gets things done. That's just me. I can't speak for everybody. I'm not trying to. But you'll notice in all those little sound bites, the one thing that never comes up is what James Carville mentioned so many years ago.
Stay focused. Talk about things that matter to people. It's the economy, stupid.
You want to know why Donald Trump is so successful? It's because he erased regulatory policy by Barack Obama. That's all that was needed. This is the interesting thing. Barack Obama purposely sabotaged the American economy by putting upon it regulations that never needed to be there, that basically put the brakes on anything that anyone could do. All Donald Trump had to do was remove them. He did, and the next thing you know, you saw the American economy see growth levels that were 20 to 50% higher than anything that you saw under Barack Obama. And there's no reason for it to go higher, because instead of, let me make this clear, when you get rid of government regulations, you're placing your bet with the American people. You're saying, I'm not going to shackle you. I'm going to trust you to run this economy. And they have revved it up, and it's running better. It is more productive. Again, more job openings than job seekers. Historically low unemployment. GDP levels on a quarterly basis that we were told by the experts after 8 years of Obamonomics were not achievable. This stuff was never, you'll never see that again. It's just not the way. We're not built that way anymore. Always, let me help you with leftists. They are always talking down the American people. Always talking against the capabilities of the American people, because the problem they have with every nation in the world that is not the United States and Israel is that those two nations understand what their people can do. Donald Trump came along and said, go do it. Just go do it. And we're seeing that. And they're doing everything they can to try to get that genie back in the bottle. My hope is that the American people are awake, that they're looking at this nonsense and saying no. And let me clarify what I mean by this. In all of the world, there are two nations that matter, the United States and Israel. They are the only ones who will fight tooth and nail, and have fought tooth and nail, for individual liberty. Not freedom, liberty. What globalists cannot stand, and progressives and liberals cannot stand, is for individual liberty to be a dominant doctrine. Because liberalism, progressivism, globalism all depend on being able to control someone. Someone who recognizes that they have and will fight for individual liberty cannot be controlled. So you must find a way to break them down. Barack Obama did a good job for 8 years of breaking down the American belief that they could accomplish anything. But he couldn't kill it. But now he's trying to kill it by just talking people out of what they are seeing. The economy is going gangbusters. Let me tell you what it means when the economy is going gangbusters. It means the American people are on the loose. Now, if you don't want the American people to be on the loose, vote for Democrats. They'll be happy to chain you up again, tell you how everything is bad, and that the only way it'll get better is if you succumb to their heinous doctrine. That's what they want. That's what they expect. And that is everything they're asking for under the guise of faux compassion and the idea that what has never worked anywhere cannot fail if we all do it together. You want to check on the system? You already got to check on the system. The check on the system came in November 2016. The check on the system came in the 12 or 13 special elections that have occurred since the inauguration. 10 of those were won by the GOP. I'm sorry. The American people have been speaking since 2009 when they had, during that time, they have snatched more than 1,000 elected offices at the federal and state level from the Democrat Party and given them to their opposition. There's a reason for that. Because they saw who Barack Obama was. They saw who the Democrat Party was. And though they liked Barack Obama enough to elect him a second time, fantastically, they took power away from him at the state and federal level for every year they had an opportunity at the state and local level. They did it. They snatched it. They took it away. And by the time you got to the end of Barack Obama's reign, there was no state structure left to support him winning or to support Hillary Clinton winning. The only place where she was winning was in propaganda on mainstream media. And had there been no propaganda, I don't know if she would have gotten 150 electoral votes. Barack Obama is back out of hiding, but he's saying more and more to fewer and fewer people. There's a reason for that. Because the people are starting to feel themselves, which means they don't need to hear that much from politicians. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force of internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of this first hour. The Democrats and this Kavanaugh-nsense is just off the board. Let me do this much and give the Democrats, also known as the devil, his due. They would make a dog on a bone look like someone who had no perseverance whatsoever. Let's start with what blew up on the 14th of this month, which is, we're just going to play this thing from CNN announcing this big allegation, and then, of course, there was also a denial. So we'll start with CNN from the 14th of September.
Other breaking news that's also emerging right now, this time out of Washington. A woman says the president's U.S. Supreme Court nominee, Brett Kavanaugh, assaulted her when she and Kavanaugh were both in high school. CNN's Jessica Schneider is joining us right now. So, Jessica, first of all, what do we know about this woman and what she says about Kavanaugh, what he allegedly did?
Yeah, Wolf, a vehement denial from Brett Kavanaugh, and it all revolves around this decades-old assault allegation. So it comes from a woman who knew Brett Kavanaugh in high school in the 1980s, and her allegations are coming to light now because she recently wrote a letter to her congresswoman in California. That letter was then passed on to the top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Dianne Feinstein. So here's what was detailed in the letter. This is according to a source familiar with this letter. So it was in the early 1980s when this woman attended a party in Maryland with Brett Kavanaugh and other high schoolers. She says Kavanaugh physically pushed her into a bedroom at that party, and along with another male, Kavanaugh allegedly locked the door and played loud music, which the accuser says precluded her from being heard when she yelled for help. So this woman says both of these men were drunk, and she says Kavanaugh allegedly tried to take off her clothes and also allegedly had his hand over her mouth. And at one point, because of this, the accuser says she feared for her life, but she was finally able to leave the room, and she eventually left the party. Now, there's no indication that this woman ever reported this incident to law enforcement. She says, however, that she, in the years since, has received medical treatment. So all of this came to light because Senator Feinstein revealed yesterday that she handed this letter with these allegations over to the FBI, and I've been told that the letter has been put in Kavanaugh's background file, but there is no criminal investigation here. So meanwhile, today, Brett Kavanaugh issuing a statement where he strongly denies these allegations. So this is the brief but terse statement he released this morning. He said, "I categorically deny this allegation. I did not do this back in high school or at any time." And of course, the White House has continually maintained that Kavanaugh was thoroughly vetted. And Republicans, in fact, are circulating this letter here. It's a letter signed by 65 women, front and back here, who knew Brett Kavanaugh when he attended high school between 1979 and 1983. All of them say that the Brett Kavanaugh they know behaved honorably, treated women with respect, Wolf. And they say in the 35 years they've known him, he's always treated women with respect. So the question is here, will this have any impact on the vote on this nomination? We know the Senate Judiciary scheduled to vote on this on Thursday, and then it will move to the full Senate. But of course, that will be the last week in September. But Wolf, two crucial senators for that vote, Republicans Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. So could this decades-old allegation influence their vote at all? We know that Senator Collins has a pre-scheduled phone call with Brett Kavanaugh today. That is still set to happen. So we'll see whether or not this letter, these allegations, have any effect. But of course, Brett Kavanaugh strongly denying anything to this effect. Wolf?
All right, Jessica, thanks very much. Laura Coates, Kerry Cordero, let's get your quick analysis. What do you think?
Well, this reminds you a lot of the 1991 confirmation hearings involving Anita Hill, doesn't it, with then candidate or nominee Clarence Thomas, where it alleged at the late hour. This one does have that political feel to it, but more importantly, note the number of times you had to say allegations. The fact that it was not reported will have an impact on the ultimate voting strength of this nomination, and it really should, but it's one that's surprising that it's happening late in the game, and I think she's trying to avoid the Joe Biden effect, which happened when he failed to bring forth witnesses in that hearing.
Well, the big difference, though, of course, is that we know who Anita Hill was, and she appeared in person. This is an anonymous allegation, and I just think it's so important to emphasize that this person, at least in the article that's been written so far in the New Yorker, has not been identified. She has sent a letter, but she is not willing so far to speak publicly, and so with Judge Kavanaugh denying the allegation so strongly, we'll have to wait and see if there's any other credibility behind what right now is simply an anonymous allegation.
We'll stay on top of this. We'll stay on top of all the breaking news.
So you get it. We've been here before, and they brought up the difference, which was at the time, a couple of days ago, we had no idea who this woman was. Somebody knew, but it wasn't anything in the public. And they brought up the parallel to Clarence Thomas, where we had Anita Hill, and she was all out there. And let's not forget that the Democrats took good care of Anita Hill after she told her set of lies, and they were lies. They've been demonstrated to be lies, but that's a different story. Now, for his part, our good buddy Brett Kavanaugh has done what anyone who's faced with an allegation of something that he didn't do should do. He simply said no.
Tonight's Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh firing back against that secretive accusation of sexual misconduct, saying, "I categorically and unequivocally deny this allegation. I did not do this back in high school or at any time." The accusation over an incident that allegedly took place more than 30 years ago spelled out in a letter given to top Democrat Dianne Feinstein weeks ago. The New York Times, citing 3 people familiar with the letter, reporting it says Kavanaugh and a male friend trapped a teenage girl in a bedroom during a high school party. Kavanaugh allegedly got on top of the teenager and put a hand over her mouth before she freed herself and left the room. Tonight, that friend telling the Weekly Standard, "It's just absolutely nuts. I never saw Brett act that way." Feinstein revealing the letter's existence Thursday, saying she gave the information to the FBI. Feinstein's spokesman writing, "The woman in question made it clear she did not want this information to be public." Republicans pushing back, Orrin Hatch blasting it as an 11th-hour accusation that Democrats did not see fit to raise for over a month. And 65 women who knew Kavanaugh in high school signing a letter saying for the entire time we've known Brett Kavanaugh, he's behaved honorably and treated women with respect. Republicans say Kavanaugh's committee vote will still happen next week. Peter Alexander, NBC News.
And it gets better, guys. The other shoe will drop soon. But after all the I am Spartacus and all the histrionics and dramatics from Kamala Harris, all of which amounted to nothing, came by, the Democrats got the best that they could, which was a delay of the vote, which could have happened back on the 13th, and that's going to be now pushed to the 20th, as evidenced by this clip from CBS News.
We have a quorum present. I'm holding over the nomination.
Mr. Chairman.
Motion defeated. With that vote, I now move to report from the committee the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to be Associate Justice of the Supreme Court after debate on September the 20th at 1:45 p.m.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask you a question?
Okay. Call the roll.
Aye. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Lee. Aye. Mr. Cruz. Aye. Mr. Sachs. Aye. Mr. Flake.
Aye.
Mr. Crapo.
Aye.
Mr. Tillis.
Aye.
Mr. Kennedy.
Aye.
Mrs. Feinstein. No. Mr. Leahy.
No, because I follow the rules.
Mr. Durbin.
No.
Mr. Whitehouse.
No.
Ms. Klobuchar.
No.
Mr. Coons.
No by proxy.
Mr. Blumenthal.
No.
Ms. Corona.
No.
Mr. Booker.
No.
Ms. Harris. No. Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
If only it stopped there. They got a week. That's not good enough. You really have to understand how important the courts are to leftists and globalists, because they know they cannot get their agenda over at the polls. Not in America. Not unless you have what a completion of what Barack Obama tried to start in 2009 when he said change has come to America. They didn't get all the change that they wanted. They know they cannot win at the polls. They have to be able to get things done through the courts. The only reason you have homosexual marriage being perpetrated throughout the country is not because they won at the polls. They lost at the polls. They lost twice in California at the polls. But when all you need is one liberal judge to invalidate the opinions of millions of voters, well, you understand what's very important. So here's what we did not know before, and now we know, as the Washington Post reported on the 16th. Guess what? The California professor, who's a writer of the confidential Brett Kavanaugh letter, speaks out about her allegation of sexual assault. Her name, Christine Blasey Ford, and she is the one who wrote the confidential letter to a senior Democrat lawmaker, alleging that Brett Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her more than 3 decades ago. Stop. She didn't report this to anybody. It didn't even come up until 2012 when she was in couples therapy with her husband. I'm supposed to believe this. I got 65 women plus this is a man who is married and has children. Nobody else in the universe is alleging anything about this. This is a guy who actually has the majority of his law clerks as females. They have nothing bad to say about him. But one woman from 30 some odd years ago, with no corroboration. Let me tell you why this is going on. Because of Roe v. Wade. Because of Trump Russia. Those are the only reasons. I have to be able to save my agenda, and I have to be able to keep hope alive that there's some way to get rid of a duly elected president. So someone turned the screws on Christine Blasey Ford. If we can get his nomination delayed another week, will you come forward? Because if you think between now and the 20th there is not going to be extreme pressure to have this woman come forward and tell her story Anita Hill style, then you really don't understand who the Democrat Party is. Whether or not it happens, I can't say. But you will now hear the chorus with Spartacus Booker and her incompetence Harris leading the charge to say this woman must be heard from. She's had more than 3 decades to be heard from. She's got nothing to say that matters. Well, she's got notes from her therapist, who doesn't know any of the people involved and is only getting one side of the story. But she's an expert who knows none of the people involved and is getting one side of the story. Her husband believes her. Well, gee whiz, they were in therapy. I wonder if they'd still be married if he didn't believe her, if he didn't go along with her. What does any of this prove? The only reason this is going as far as it is we have the precedent of Cosby. It doesn't matter how old the allegation is. It doesn't matter anything. All that matters is some woman is upset and is claiming that some guy is the cause of it. As a result of that, his life, his progress, his ambitions, all that should be put on hold, not because he did anything, but because a woman says he did something. And they did it with Clarence Thomas. It didn't work. They did it with Herman Cain. It worked with Cain. Cain just didn't have the character. Or, to be honest with you, I'm not anti Herman Cain. Herman Cain had no business running for president. He just didn't. He wasn't cut out for that type of job. He wasn't ready. they keep, and this is a Democrat playbook classic. Let's find some woman somewhere who's going to say something negative about this man's character, and all we need is the hint, particularly if he's not one of us. Of course, the hypocrisy of the Democrat Party always lives on in the person of William Jefferson Clinton, who they still have not sanctioned for all the folks he raped. But that doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter when you're a Democrat. So I predict between now and the 20th, there will be a big push by Democrats to get one Christine Blasey Ford to appear, lawyer at her side, to speak of her unsubstantiated allegations against Brett Kavanaugh. Remember, they have been pushing this woman since the moment she decided to say anything. They have been pushing, you got to testify. You got to testify. You really got to understand what's at stake. And if you don't testify, we really don't have any hope. And we've done this and we've told your story and we're doing this, but you have to step up. If she doesn't show up in Washington, D.C. next week, I will be surprised. I will almost be shocked. If she has anything to say more than what's been said so far, again, I will be almost shocked. And if Kavanaugh does anything other than repeat what he's already said, I didn't do it, I'll be shocked. Will the vote go forward on the 20th? That is the question. To be honest, it should. They should not hear from this quote-unquote witness. They already have her statement. She can't corroborate the statement. She has nothing to offer. Just because her name is now associated with it doesn't make it any different. We should go on and act like we're going to have a Supreme Court. Full complement, nine justices on October 1st. Let me turn this over to my good friend Ron Edwards. And after that, we'll be back with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinking.
Don't start nothing, won't be nothing. Hello, I'm Ron Edwards. On today's page from the Edwards Notebook, in recent months, leftist hordes have been beating up anyone they think likes America, supports Donald Trump, loves Jesus Christ, and appreciates our Constitution and Bill of Rights. One leftist crowd was caught chanting, "No wall, no USA at all." Leftists have destroyed storefronts and shattered huge glass windows at Berkeley Indoctrination University in California. Conservative women are often threatened with violence unto death for simply not supporting the hateful abortion industry of killing unborn babies. On one hand, leftists from Way Out Waters to Joy Behar talk about inclusiveness and tolerating all viewpoints. But the truth is, they are on a mad mission to eradicate everything on earth that represents that which is good for our republic or morality. The Strzok emails are proof of the deep state leftist hatred of those who want to strengthen our borders and our republic overall. To the leftist, I say unto you, don't start nothing, won't be nothing, or one day you might learn the hard way about an equal and opposite reaction. I'm Ron Edwards. Join me Fridays, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific on AmericaMatters.us and SHR Media, and Sunday midnights on Talk America Radio Network.
Ron Edwards, the new voice of America.
Sponsored by the Tri-County Liberty Coalition.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Men Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it's made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Men Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Men Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problems. Government is the problem.
Black Men Thinkin.
Stanley Levy with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinking here on the dominant force of Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. And we have another false murder claim against a police officer. Here's an interesting thing to me before I get started. I know that more whites are killed by police than blacks, almost twice as much, and I can back that number up. How come we never see news reports of those more numerous killings? Have you ever thought about that? That's not to take away from the tragedy when anyone is killed by the police, particularly if they didn't need to be killed or should not have been killed, quote unquote. But you really want to tell me that the only folks who are being killed by police are blacks when nearly twice as many whites die from police violence? I digress. Well, in the latest situation that we have, this happened in Dallas. Looks like back on the 6th or the 7th of September, a white police officer finishing a very long shift came to her apartment building and went to the wrong apartment. And the rest I'll give you from this particular NBC report.
At first, Dallas police didn't know it was one of their own who had killed an unarmed man in his apartment.
I know it's chaotic, but if anybody can get a suspect description or location.
Then the details became even more confusing.
We're not going to have a suspect.
According to a statement from police, a female officer who had arrived home in full uniform after working a full shift told investigators she tried to open the door to what she thought was her apartment, but the electronic key that all residents use here didn't work.
She had to turn red right there.
Turns out the officer was on the wrong floor at the wrong apartment. She was at the door to Botham Jean's home. When the door opened, the police officer, who is white, saw the 26-year-old standing there. It's unclear what happened next or how long it took before that officer pulled her gun and fired. She then called 911.
Bless the Lord, oh my soul.
Jean, an active church member and risk assurance associate at PricewaterhouseCoopers, shot dead.
The explanation does not make sense.
His mother tonight.
If he was a white man in that apartment, would it have been different? Would she have reacted differently? Why is it because he was a black man that she had to act in that way?
We want to be, and we will be, as transparent in this investigation as we can be.
Dallas police say paramedics drew the officer's blood at the scene, testing it now for alcohol and drugs. The Texas Rangers tonight conducting an independent investigation.
I need to look into her eyes and ask her why she did that to my son. She took away my heart. She took away my soul. She took away everything.
Kerry Sanders, NBC News, Miami.
Okay, I'm going to say this. I don't want to hear from another grieving mother with regard to a police shooting. I don't want to hear it. There's nothing that she has to say that is relevant. She's grieving. Of course, she feels like she's been wronged, and she very well may have been. She has nothing of substance to add to the story. She was not there. She does not know the officer. She does not know the circumstances. The only thing she knows is her pain, and that is not news. nor does it help the investigation that you feel badly that your child was killed. I get that. I don't care, because that's not going to tell me what happened. I don't want to hear it anymore. Okay? Send your cards and letters. I do not care. I don't care what color. I don't care what anything. If someone is shot by the police and killed, I'm not going to learn a doggone thing hearing from the shooting victim's mother, who was not there, who does not know the officer, has no idea what occurred. Stop showing it to me. Tell me that there's an investigation. There is an investigation. Now, the other thing that came up was that it took 3 days to arrest her. Why wasn't she arrested immediately? Well, guess what? Where was she going to go? You think she's a flight risk? She's a cop. She's fingerprinted. There's no place she can go in the country where they're not going to be able to locate her, find her, and bring her back. And if she runs, she's going to be a very high priority target. Well, she should be treated like everybody else. You can make that argument. I'm not going to dispute it. It doesn't bother me that she wasn't arrested immediately. Because the first thing you have to determine is whether a crime occurred. Well, she murdered. No, really? No murder occurred. There is no evidence suggesting a murder. There is evidence of homicide. A man was killed. That is by definition homicide. Murder, by definition, requires malice aforethought and the absence of due process of law. You need to have both of those. At this point, you're going to have a hard time proving there was malice aforethought. Unless you can pierce the narrative that says she was at that apartment in error, thinking it was hers. At that point, the confusion takes over. How she gets in the apartment, obviously, she didn't have a key that worked, so it would stand to reason that he opened the door. That did not resolve her confusion. It could have been because she had just worked 15 hours of 15-hour shift straight. Could be any number of reasons. But she was obviously out of sorts. There's nothing to indicate that the man who was shot did anything incorrect, improper, or wrong. He was simply home. He opened the door to somebody banging on it, according to some reports. Well, let's get into that. There's another CNN report that implies that the officer's story does not hold up. Let's go ahead and listen to that.
There may be much more to the tragic story of a Dallas police officer who claimed she mistakenly entered the wrong apartment and then shot and killed a black man inside the apartment, the resident. Amber Geiger, who is white, claims she thought Botham Sheem Jean had broken into her home last Thursday night when she entered his apartment and killed the innocent man. But now the attorney for the victim says two witnesses are contradicting the officer's version of events. CNN's Ryan Young reports from Dallas.
I know we have a hard problem with getting justice in these streets. But damn, can we get justice in our living room?
Demands for answers in Dallas are growing louder as contradicting stories emerge over the death of 26-year-old Botham Jean. A witness who captured this video says it shows off-duty policewoman Amber Geiger distraught and pacing on the balcony of her Dallas apartment complex Thursday night, still in uniform after finishing her shift. Geiger had opened fire around 10 p.m., killing John after saying she mistook his fourth-floor apartment for her own third-floor residence. According to the affidavit, the room was nearly completely dark. Believing she had encountered a burglar across the room in her apartment, Geiger drew her firearm and gave verbal commands that were ignored.
We hope to bring understanding and clarity to the family.
But John's family attorney says witnesses add more to the story.
They both heard a knock or a pounding on the door. The one who was closer to the scene in her bedroom reading a book, she heard pounding followed by a female's voice saying, "Open up, let me in." She said that was shortly followed by the sound of gunshots and the sound of a man's voice saying what she believed to be, "Oh my God, why did you do that?"
Geiger was arrested Sunday evening and was charged with manslaughter. She posted bail and was released just hours later. Now prosecutors say more serious charges won't be ruled out.
The grand jury will be that entity that will make the final decision in terms of the charges.
Geiger has been placed on administrative leave as her case is investigated. But protesters aren't waiting. Crowds took to the streets outside the Dallas Police Department Monday.
They don't come to us and ask us. You're right. About what happened.
And continued marching into the night. John's red doormat is adorned with flowers, and his mother is still begging for truth.
The number one answer that I want is what happened. I have asked too many questions, and I've been told that there are no answers yet.
We've reached out to Geiger's attorney, but they have not reached back out to us. Something else to keep in mind here, Jake. Last night during the protest, there were two groups that were marching, and at some point it seems that someone started firing some pepper ball spray toward them. They're trying to figure out exactly right now who did that. In fact, the police chief says they're going to investigate it.
Let's break some things down real quick. The mother, again, is featured. I have questions that I don't have answers yet. No, you don't, because there's an ongoing investigation. They haven't completed the investigation. When they finish the investigations, they will give you the best answers they have. They will also go to a grand jury and see if there is an indictment for a crime. Now, I am not of the opinion that the facts as they currently stand support a murder charge. They do support, in my opinion, involuntary manslaughter, which basically means she killed somebody she didn't intend to kill. Well, she drew the gun and shot at him. I said, well, yeah, because she thought something was going on that was not correct. She did kill him. That is homicide. That is manslaughter. But there is nothing to indicate that she had malice against this man, that she thought ill of him beforehand, or that she believed she was acting outside of due process. She says she saw him and gave commands. They were not obeyed, and she fired. She's done this before, by the way, and she was totally cleared in another shooting a few years ago. This is not a trigger-happy person. This is someone who just simply does her job. She made a ridiculously bad mistake. Now, the guy in that clip was saying, we can't get justice out here in these streets. Let me remind people of something regarding Dallas. Dallas has a 25% black population, but roughly half of the murder victims and half of the murder suspects, actually more than half, are black. So you tell me, now we already know that nationwide, more than 90% of blacks who are homicide victims are killed by other blacks. So when this guy says we can't get any justice in these streets, of whom is he speaking? Because you're talking to the same people who are killing your people, and it's not the cops. The police don't kill that man. Let me remind people, see, there was a project that was ended because they weren't getting the results they wanted. The Guardian, over in the UK, they started a database called The Counted, and they did for 2 years. They did 2015 and 2016, believing that they were going to find out that the cops were just dirty. They found in 2015, 1,146 people were killed by the cops. 307 of them were black. 584 of them were white. Let me say that again. 307 were black in 2015. 584 were white. There goes your narrative. In 2016, they found 1,093 were killed in the U.S. by police. 574 were white. Only 266 were black. There goes your narrative. And after that, they stopped, because the numbers don't support the narrative. They never have. They never will. They're just not going to. So I am all for this particular officer, the facts of this case, leading her to, chick, you're going to do some time. Or you should. Now, if After all this, she is not given a jail sentence if she is convicted of manslaughter, involuntary or otherwise. That's reason to protest. But to go out and claim this to be murder, you guys don't even know what murder is if you think this is murder. It's not. There are no facts to support this being a murder. We've tried this before. Remember, you tried that even with someone who was not a cop. His name was George Zimmerman. You tried that, and you got pimp slapped trying that foolishness. There is nothing here but a tragedy because someone, maybe they were overworked, I don't know. She got confused. She went to the wrong place, made the wrong decision, and someone is dead. Should she answer for that? Most definitely. Should you get to define the crime? No, that's why we have laws. And by every law that I know, she is in line for a manslaughter conviction if she's convicted at all. Now, while they're doing that, I still don't see black folks who are only 25% of the population in Dallas, but more than half of the homicide victims and perpetrators in Dallas. What are they doing to reduce that? When they go on and protest, do they ever protest themselves for killing? I don't think so. Same thing throughout the rest of the country. Blacks commit a lot of murder, but they never protest the murders that they commit. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, the Gran Diva is still putting that social justice lie in the airways that she was a victim of sexism at the U.S. Open. She hasn't given up on that yet. For those who do not recall, let's go back to the 10th. Let's go back. When was the match? The match would have been the 8th. Let's go back to the 8th so you can hear her argument.
Something everyone is still talking about. Sure. It was made huge news over the weekend. Serena Williams calling out sexism in tennis. It was this heated dispute. I'm sure you've heard about this with the umpire at the U.S. Open. So he claimed that she broke the rules because her coach was giving her hand signals from the stands. That's how it all kind of started. She lost a point. She received a game penalty, and ultimately she was fined $17,000. It was very, very dramatic. Here is how it all went down.
Serena was watching her coach give her a hand signal.
Verbal abuse.
And now,
Mrs. Williams.
Wow. Are you kidding me? That's like saying you're a thief. I'm not a cheater.
He called Carlos Ramos a thief. That was what he took exception to.
That's not right. This is not fair. You know how many other men do things that are, I don't think they do much worse than that. This is not fair.
Let's be clear, because that female host kind of blurred and muddied up the events. Here is what actually happened. Carlos Ramos, who was the chair umpire for this match, saw that Patrick Mouratoglou, Serena's coach, was giving her coaching from the stands during the U.S. Open match, during a Grand Slam match. That is a code violation. He issued a code violation. The way code violations work is the first one is simply a warning. You're not adhering to the code, so you know what the code is. We're telling you you're not doing it. Clean up your act. There is nothing more than a warning. If you get a second code violation, that will cost you a point. A third code violation will cost you a game. will cost you a game. If there's one after that, then you can expect to be ejected. You'll be thrown out of the match, if not the tournament. Simple as that. So by the time we picked up this particular tirade, she had already gotten her first one. Then she slams the racket. That gets her a point. And then she comes back and calls him a thief. Now, I don't know how many of you believe that you should endure that just because the person yelling at you believes they're important. There are a lot of people whose honor will not tolerate them being called things of that nature. His does not. He said, no, you're not going to call me a thief. You can say anything else you want to. She called him a liar. He didn't get her for that. You going to call him a thief? Nope. Now, going back to the very first code violation, she was adamant in protesting that and saying that she did not receive coaching. Although the rules don't say anything about receiving, it just says that coaching should not occur. And how is the chair umpire supposed to know what you receive? Here's what the chair umpire likely knows. He knows where the players are because they're in front of him. He can see them. He has a good idea of where the coaches for each player are sitting. They're likely behind him. So when he sees a player look up in the stands in a direction that is roughly where he believes the coach to be, he can look over his shoulder and probably see the coach. And in that one I just played, you may recall, I believe it was Chris Everett said that Serena was looking at her coach giving her hand signals. So it wasn't just the chair umpire who believed that or saw that. More importantly, Serena's coach fessed up.
Motion that you made that was interpreted by the chair umpire as coaching?
Well, I mean, I'm honest. I was coaching. I mean, I don't think she looked at me, so that's why she didn't even think I was. But I was like 100% of the coaches on 100% of the matches. So we have to stop this hypocrite thing. Sasha was coaching every point too. It just, I mean, and it's strange because this chair umpire was the chair umpire of most of the finals of Rafa, and Tony's coaching every single point, and he never gave a warning. So I don't really get it.
Do you think?
So we had a brief moment of honesty. Yeah, I was coaching. Then he follows it up with the same type of ain't my fault stuff that Serena's trying to do. Well, everybody does it. You know what? I remember I had a mama and a daddy. And I remember trying that everybody else does it stuff out on them. And I remember how many times it got my behind enlarged from swelling. Please explain to me why someone who's supposed to be a role model is supposed to be able to get away with an excuse that you couldn't even pull on your mom when you were 6 years old. That is foolishness. Somebody actually called out Serena Williams in a proper manner, who happens to be a former cricket announcer. He's a talk show host on one of the many sports outlets that exist around the world. Here's how it was characterized.
The 23-time Grand Slam champion has been both criticized and praised after she lashed out at umpire Carlos Ramos during her Flushing Meadows final defeat against Naomi Osaka. The Spaniard warned Williams for receiving coaching from her team before docking her a point for smashing her racket. Ramos then penalized her a game later in the match, which led the American to brand him a thief midway through the second set. Williams' behavior took the spotlight off deserving winner Osaka, who was visibly distraught when picking up her first ever Grand Slam title. And TalkSport co-host Goff has lashed out at the tennis icon, labeling her a spoiled brat. Yeah, I think she was a spoiled brat, the former England cricketer said. I think she's got that power in the game. She's been a dominant force for so long and she's done so many brilliant things on a tennis court. Playing while pregnant, which was fantastic, and winning the Australian Grand Slam. The way she's come back after giving birth is a great advert to show that there's nothing can stop you. She's brilliant, absolutely world-class athlete. But the way she has acted these last couple of days has been the biggest turn-off ever. Williams also branded Ramos sexist in her post-match press conference, insisting male tennis players would have been treated differently. But Goff claims the 36-year-old's gender shouldn't mean she escapes punishment. No matter how good she is as an athlete, no matter how good she is as a female, she's got to obey by the rules, he added. And to take that away from that young girl, Osaka, whose first Grand Slam, the first Japanese lady to win a Grand Slam, it's embarrassing, it really is. She went OTT, she deserved to be punished. There's no agenda, she's a tennis player who crossed the line and deserved to be punished.
Yeah. So let's remember something. One, she's a spoiled brat. Let's remember something else. What she did to Naomi Osaka, she did to someone else at the 2011 U.S. Open. I cannot remember the young lady's name. I remember I think she was from Australia. It was her first U.S. Open win. And Serena Williams went ballistic during that one as well, because that woman kicked a bone out of Serena's behind and basically took her moment of having her first win away as well, because it was coming at Serena's expense. So this isn't the first time she's done this. She also did something similar in 2009. I think it was a semifinals match with against Kim Clijsters in 2009, when she was called for a foot fault, and she threatened the line judge. Said that she was going to take the effing ball and ram it down her effing throat. And even, according to the line judge, threatened to kill her. And, of course, not surprisingly, Serena says, I didn't do that. And if you ever see the video or hear the audio of that, you'll hear somebody call out of the stands saying, yeah, you did. So it's hilarious to me. Serena Williams is not a person of high character. I'm sorry. Anybody can be well behaved when they're winning, but nobody wins all the time. If you want to criticize John McEnroe for his excesses on court, you can do that. He's not going to try to say it was any other reason. He got upset, he wouldn't control it, and he took the consequences. He didn't try to play it off as something else and say other people should. I don't remember that from McEnroe. It's part of that feminine thing, I guess. You know, another interesting thing, USA Today went out and talked to three former tennis umpires, and they got one guy. None of them are umpires anymore. The first guy they talked to, who sided with Serena Williams, his name was Magdi Somat. He's an Egyptian umpire who no longer officiates in professional tennis. Turns out, according to the ATP, he was fired for being insubordinate, aggressive, and disrespectful with a supervisor, and off the court, rude, aggressive, and arrogant with a linesman. They fired him, so he doesn't officiate anymore. He's on the same side with Serena Williams, which basically means he agrees with their behavior because it was his. They act the same, so he didn't have any problem with it. The other two retired in good standing, and their response is pretty clear. Serena was out of line, and Carlos Ramos simply followed the rules. They do say that he probably could have cleaned things up by, having better communication, because there was this obvious communication thing going on with Serena where she thought she had talked him out of the first violation, and therefore that gave her more room and more latitude to clown. So she thought when she threw her racket into the ground that was just going to be a warning. Can I ask why you're throwing your racket into the ground? Now, USA Today, in their left-handed attempt to try to support Serena, they took these two umpires in good standing, this one who was fired, and said, well, three umpires have a split decision. Really? The only two who really have good standing say that the guy who called the match did a good job. Really? Come on, guys. Oh, by the way, the Mail, Daily Mail from the UK Online, posted an article on the 13th. Carlos Ramos receives apology as figures emerge showing male tennis players are penalized more often than women for bad behavior. Wow. In other words, Serena Williams either is very poorly informed or she lied. I will say that in the heat of the moment, we can possibly give her the benefit of the doubt of saying that she was simply poorly informed, either intentionally or strategically poorly informed. However, Carlos Ramos was pictured in Croatia talking with USTA President Katrina Adams, with witnesses claiming they overheard her saying sorry for the fallout over the Serena Williams sexism row in the U.S. Open. The conversation prior to America's Davis Cup semifinal coincides with Sportsmail obtaining data from the last 20 years of Grand Slams, displaying the misdemeanors of the two sexes at the sport's four biggest events. And I'm sorry. It shows that in the sphere of coaching violations, which since 1998 has seen women punished nearly twice as often as men, with 152 fines to 87. Otherwise, there are marked contrasts, the clearest being for racket abuse, which stacks up 646 to 99 in the favor of men. 646 to 99. With respect to verbal abuse, 62 violations handed out to men compared to 16 for women. So with the exception of coaching, it's not even close. And if you think Serena Williams is telling the truth, then you have issues as well. You have some character issues as well, because you didn't go back and look at the data. It's really bad. It's really bad. Let me give you another look at the penalty stats. Racket abuse, men 646, women 99. Audible obscenity, men 344, women 140. Ball abuse, men 49, women 35. Coaching violations, the only place where women get more violations, 87 men, 152 women. Unsportsmanlike conduct, 287 men to 67 for women. Verbal abuse, 62 for men, 16 for women. Visible obscenity, 20 for men, 11 for women. So she's not telling the truth. Let me hit one more thing in the head before I go. I am tired of people telling this lie that Serena Williams is the greatest athlete of all time. She is not. She may be the greatest one that you've seen, but that's probably because you are among those who believe history begins the day you were born. She's not even the greatest female athlete of all time. That would inarguably, if you look at accomplishments, go to Babe Didrikson, who competed in more sports against men and was successful against both genders. You don't have to believe me. And if you don't know by now, I really don't care. I've done my homework. Have you? The answer is probably not. So we are still getting this social justice nonsense from Serena Williams. Serena Williams is in the twilight of her career. She's married. She's a mother. So she's not going to have that hunger anymore. And that's part of the frustration that's coming out now, even though this is something that's been in her since at least 2009 at the U.S. Open. You think it's going to get better? Not hardly. Not hardly at all. I am not surprised a bit. I've watched Serena Williams over the years. Her body composition has changed significantly since she was 20 in a manner that is reminiscent of what happened to Barry Bonds when he was in his 20s versus what happened by the time he became someone no one would pitch to before he retired. Barry Bonds was a skinny kid with a narrow head when he was in Pittsburgh. By the time he gets out to San Francisco and is launching things into the Bay, dude's head blew up like a milk dud, and all of a sudden he's all buff and everything. But he says he didn't take anything, and we don't believe that that's necessarily the case. I wonder how Serena went from looking much less huge. She was always a big girl, don't get me wrong, but she was looking much less huge when she was in her 20s, and now she doesn't even look like the same person, including her head's a little bit bigger as well. Wonder what she's been taking. Oh, why you're I'm not slandering anything. I'm just saying, if you choose not to see it, that's on you. Trust me, I don't care. She's made her money. She's done everything else. But do not keep trying to push upon me the greatness of someone who is nothing other than a spoil sport. She's a good tennis player. She's not a good person. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of the show. I'm going to put this as bluntly as I can. Will anyone protect U.S. children from U.S. women? Now, I know what that's going to get some people to think, but I'm not playing. I'm not being flip here. There are 3 causes of damage to children that are documented by women in this country. An obvious one that has killed tens of millions since 1973 is abortion. That and the courts and men and society have refused to protect children from murderous women, and it is murder. You know, a cop going to the wrong apartment and thinking that someone has broken into her home and therefore issues orders as a police officer which are not obeyed and then firing a shot is, well, you know what? That's a homicide. Nobody's going to argue that that's not a homicide. But the idea that there was any intent behind that is questionable at best. All abortion is intentional. All abortion is focused on a victim that has no way to escape. And there is malice aforethought, and it does take some thinking. A second source, is fatherlessness, which in the United States we have almost elevated, talking about the wondrous qualities and the selflessness of single mothers, to the point where the 2-parent family in the United States is not the norm. And among the black community, forget about it. Forget about it. Despite the fact that at least 3/4 of those who end up in jail point to the lack of a father in the home, being raised by women, as they don't point to it. It's simply something they all have in common. More than 3 out of 4 people who wind up incarcerated did not have a man in the home. Well, you know, dad can come. We're not talking about dad coming around. We're not talking about this drive-by fathering. We're talking about you live in the house with your father. And particularly if you're a young man living in the house with your mother, you're never going to be a man. She doesn't know how to raise a man. She doesn't have the equipment. If you don't have a Y chromosome, you don't know how to shape anyone who does. You're guessing. You're hoping. And at least 3 out of 4 times you miss wrong badly. The third one, I'm going to go a little bit more into detail about that, has to do with sexual abuse. Sexual abuse, that's a man thing. Really? Have you been to school lately? This is from October of 2014, an Inside Edition report.
Now something that's being called an epidemic, and it has nothing to do with the Ebola crisis. It's a wave of teachers accused of sex crimes. In fact, an independent group estimates 1 in 10 children will be the victim of teacher sexual misconduct. What's going on, and why is it happening? Les Trent goes looking for answers.
What the heck is going on? It seems like every week another young, attractive female teacher is charged with having sex with her students. Just last week in Louisiana, 2 teachers, that's right, 2 teachers, were arrested for a shocking sex crime, allegedly having 3-way sex with a 16-year-old student after the school's Friday Night Lights football game.
No matter what sex the victim is, everyone should be outraged.
The teen bragged to friends about the menage a trois, claiming he'd captured it on videotape.
We've heard the same rumors. We're trying to obtain any evidence we have.
Lauren, what were you thinking? That's the same question just about everyone in Kingston, Pennsylvania is asking. 32-year-old married English teacher Lauren Harrington Cooper was recently convicted of having sex with at least 2 students, enticing them with the line, "All the candy you need is right here."
Lauren has been diagnosed with some significant psychological issues.
Her attorney says that despite her good looks, the teacher's low self-esteem led her down the road to ruin.
She found comfort and solace in some people giving her attention.
HLN host Jane Velez Mitchell.
It's an epidemic of student-teacher sex. Let's call it what it is.
There's more.
And raise your right hand to be sworn in.
Would you believe that's another English teacher? She's 29-year-old Jennifer Fichter, and she's been charged with having sex with 3 students from 3 different schools. She allegedly claims that one boy got her pregnant and she had to get an abortion. She's pleaded not guilty to all charges.
6 years ago, she was forced to resign from another teaching job after she revealed that she allegedly had feelings for a 14-year-old boy. Why didn't she lose her license to teach?
We're not done yet. In Utah, yet another English teacher, 35-year-old Brianne Altice, is accused of having sex with her 16-year-old student in, of all places, a church parking lot. She's pleaded not guilty.
They can feel important, they can feel desired, they can feel powerful, they can have control. But they're pedophiles if they do this.
Incredibly, the U.S. Department of Education does not track cases of teacher sexual misconduct. A study by the department 10 years ago found 4.5 million children then were subjected to inappropriate behavior ranging from suggestive talk to exposure to pornography and rape.
4.5 children, and that was in 2004 they found that out, because this report was in 2014. The Catholic Church hasn't done that many children. How come no one's paying attention to all this abuse in the schools and all this abuse by women? The one woman who said she was having sex, got pregnant, and then aborted the child. So she's going for the daily double. Not only am I a pedophile, but I'm a child murderer as well. This is someone from whom children need to be protected, and she did not even lose her license to teach. Don't talk to me about a war on women. There is a war on men, and there is a greater war on children being waged by women, and no one is paying attention to it. 55 million children murdered in the womb. Millions of children being sexually molested, boys and girls, by women. And millions of children every day having the soft child abuse of not being raised by a father. And I already know the excuse that comes out, which is, well, the men don't want. No, I don't want to hear that. Because I guarantee you, if the courts lined up behind men the way they have lined up traditionally behind women over the last century or so, then we would be talking about children who didn't have much contact with their mothers at all. But all the sociological studies indicate that they might be better adjusted because the fathers raise children in a way that instills more discipline, that builds greater character. Does that mean they're better? It means that they're men. It means that they have both an X and a Y chromosome. You have to basically align the other parent and the state against the man in order to break him down and get him away from his children. That's what's happened. I know people don't want to believe that. But if you reverse this thing, I guarantee you'd see a different result. That was 2014. 2017, this epidemic hadn't gone anywhere. This from the New York Post.
It is a crime for a teacher to have sex with a child. We're seeing more women who are being arrested for these crimes. In the past, women were not arrested. It may very well be that this has been going on for a much longer period of time, but now that we're arresting the women, we're seeing this phenomenon. These are women who are married. These are women who are dating. These are women who have children. These are women who may have been divorced, and they are trying to recreate something in their mind to bring them back to a childhood situation where they had their first sexual arousal and emotional arousal. Especially younger teachers who may be just 23 and may see the high school relationships with her students as not very different from what she had when she was trying to date and find passion in relationships. And often the boundary then gets lost between the teacher and the student. But you do have the authority of the teacher over the student. It's a very powerful one. The child may look adult, they may have fully developed genitals, but they are not equipped to deal emotionally with the relationship of falling in love or falling into sex with a teacher. All of the teachers I have been involved with in my practice, their marriages ended. The children took sides, and people treated the teacher as a monster. Many of them get hospitalized psychiatrically or put on heavy medication. Many of these teachers are good teachers, and they're never going to practice again, and they have to give up their license to practice. It's horrible what people can do when a lust relationship becomes associated with attachment.
So this has been going on for quite a while now. We just now more recently started arresting women. This is not new. You just finally started trying to apply less of a double standard in apprehension. But you still have quite a double standard with regard to punishment and consequence. Here's something that just happened recently in Hudson Valley, New York.
A teacher living in the Hudson Valley admitted she performed oral sex on a 14-year-old student on, quote, multiple occasions and in multiple locations. And she won't go to prison or lose her teaching license. Prosecutors hoped Dory Myers would be sentenced to 2 years in prison. However, the 30-year-old from Rockland County will only serve 10 months probation. Myers, whose husband is a cop, will have to register as a sex offender. She taught social studies in the Bronx, and while she will keep her license, she will be fired.
You know, if a police officer shoots someone and kills them in a way that people think is improper, and then they get fired and go get a job someplace else, there's outrage. Please explain to me how you can sexually violate a child, not go to jail, not lose your ability to practice that same profession, and no one seems outraged. Where is it? Because this society will not protect women against their worst threat, and that is women. Feminism and women is the worst threat to children in these United States. And I give you again, abortion, 55 million plus dead since 1973. I give you again, fatherlessness. More than 3/4 of those who end up incarcerated were raised by women without men, and the government has sided with women against men when it comes to children and continues to do so. And now this sexual perversion and sexual predation in the schoolhouse by women. I don't want to hear about Me Too. I want to hear about a society that cares enough about children to start putting women in check. You want to hear about Roe v. Wade overturning? That is not even the tip of the iceberg tip. You want to talk about getting rid of family court or reversing some of these rulings? Now you're getting closer. But if you're going to still allow these women to go running through the schools, conning and charming and seducing children, you're not society. You're nothing. This needs to stop. Period. And I shouldn't be the only person out there saying it. So I'm going to say it again, and I do not care how you feel. Women in this country, particularly those who are either left-leaning or left-sympathetic, are a grave danger to the children of America, period. If you support abortion, you're a danger to children. If you support single parenthood, particularly single motherhood, as opposed to a nuclear family, then you are a danger to children, period. If you are not actively working to get rid of sexual predator teachers, particularly the female ones who seem to show up every doggone day, then you're a danger to children. And that's our show. God bless you. God keep you. Fix your situation and protect your country's children from those who would harm them, no matter their gender, no matter their color, no matter their ideology. May God bless.
You've been listening to Black Man Thinkin' with your host, Stan Levy. Join Stan midnight to 2 a.m. That's late Monday night into early Tuesday morning. And find him on the web at Black Man Thinkin' without the G. That's blackmanthinkin.com.